Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most dramatic, action-packed, and honestly, historically puzzling stories in the entire New Testament. We're talking about the exorcism of the Gerasene Demoniac. This is a story you'll find across all three synoptic gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke. And it's just loaded with intense action, hidden ancient cultural codes, and a geographic mystery that literally baffled scholars for centuries. So let's get right into it, because we're going to unpack exactly what happened, where it supposedly took place, and all those fascinating deeper meanings hidden just beneath the surface of the text.
My name is Legion, for we are many. It's a chilling line, right? And it hooks us immediately into this incredibly high-stakes encounter. This sets off a chain of events that is equal parts terrifying and fascinating. We aren't just looking at your standard everyday healing story here. No, we are looking at a massive confrontation between light and a seemingly insurmountable destructive darkness. So let's look at how this incredible encounter actually unfolds.
All right, part 1, the story of Legion and the pigs. So, picture the scene. Jesus and his disciples have just survived this massive, life-threatening storm on the Sea of Galilee. They finally wash up on the eastern shore of the lake. But they aren't in familiar territory anymore. They've landed in a pagan, non-Jewish region known as the Decapolis. And immediately, they are met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. A man possessed by evil spirits confronts them. Now, as a quick side note, the Gospel of Matthew actually mentions 2 men here, while Mark and Luke focus on 1. But either way, this man has been pushed to the absolute fringes of society. He's living among the tombs, completely naked, screaming day and night, and harming himself with stones. And he has this terrifying, superhuman strength. Whenever the local townspeople try to tie him up, he literally snaps the iron chains. He is completely untamable. From there, things escalate incredibly fast. First, the demons inside the man instantly recognize exactly who Jesus is, and they actually fall to their knees before him. Second, they start begging him not to torment them or send them into the abyss, which essentially means hell. Third, they spot this large herd of pigs grazing nearby and plead to be sent into the animals instead. Jesus allows it. And then, the climax. The demons enter the pigs, the entire herd panics, and they stampede straight off a steep cliff into the waters of the lake, where they drown. It is an explosive, chaotic end to the confrontation.
Which brings us to part 2, the geographical mystery. Where exactly did this happen?
Now, you might be wondering, what's the mystery? Well, this dramatic image of pigs rushing off a steep cliff into the water actually introduces a massive geographical plot hole, and it depends entirely on which gospel you happen to be reading. For centuries, this little detail gave scholars a huge headache. If you read Mark and Luke, they say this event happened in the region of the Gerasenes, pointing to the city of Gerasa. The problem, Gerasa is located about 50 kilometers away from the Sea of Galilee. That is an impossibly long distance for a stampede of pigs to run just to fall into a lake. On the flip side, Matthew says it happened in the region of the Gadarenes, pointing to Gadara. Now, Gadara is closer, about 10 kilometers away, but it completely lacks a steep cliff right by the water. So how on earth do we solve this?
The maths just doesn't add up for those first 2. Gerasa at 50 kilometers? Impossible. Gadara at 10 kilometers? Unlikely, though it was the administrative capital of the region, so Matthew was probably just using its name as a general reference for the wider area. But look at that third option. Gergesa. This geographic headache was actually solved all the way back in the 3rd century by a brilliant Christian scholar named Origen. He pointed to a town called Gergesa, known today as Kursi, and guess what? It sits exactly 0 kilometers from the lake, right on the eastern shore. Even better, modern archaeologists have excavated Kursi and found a Byzantine monastery in a cave situated right next to a steep cliff dropping directly to the shore. It perfectly matches the biblical description, making it highly probable as the true location. Mystery solved.
So, moving on to part 3, hidden symbolism and deeper meaning. With the geographical puzzle neatly solved by archaeology, we can shift gears and uncover the brilliant political and cultural codes hidden in this story. These are details an ancient reader would have picked up on immediately, but we almost always miss them today. To a first-century Jewish audience, this whole scene was an almost suffocating picture of impurity. You can think of it as a trinity of uncleanness. First, Jesus steps onto pagan territory in the Decapolis, which is already a ritually unclean space for a Jewish teacher. Second, he's confronting unclean spirits living inside a graveyard, yet another massive source of impurity. And third, those spirits are cast into a herd of pigs, strictly forbidden and ritually unclean animals. This entire scene just screams extreme, concentrated contamination. But the most striking code here It's the name the demons give themselves, legion. It is absolutely crucial to understand what that word meant back then. A Roman legion was the primary military unit of the Roman Empire, and it consisted of roughly 5,000 to 6,000 heavily armed soldiers. When an ancient reader saw the word legion, they didn't just think, oh, that's a lot of demons. No, they immediately thought of a massive, organized, and destructive military force. So, for an ancient audience living under strict and often brutal Roman occupation, this detail carries some incredibly heavy historical context. Our sources point out that Jesus effortlessly conquering a demonic entity named Legion wasn't merely a spiritual victory. It functioned as a profoundly powerful symbolic and political statement. The text clearly communicates to its original readers that Jesus possessed absolute sovereignty over even the darkest, most powerful, and most crushing occupying forces imaginable. The invader is completely expelled with just a word. But as you'll see, that victory came at a massive cost. The Gospel of Mark specifically notes there were about 2,000 pigs in this herd. To put that into perspective, in the ancient world, 2,000 pigs represented an absolutely astronomical amount of wealth. The sudden loss of that entire herd was a staggering economic disaster for the local herders. Understandably terrified, and probably terrified of facing the owners, they fled straight into the city to report what just happened.
When the local townspeople arrived at the scene to see for themselves, they were met with a startling contrast. On one hand, there's the formerly possessed man. He's sitting there, fully clothed and completely in his right mind. The danger is gone, but instead of celebrating this miraculous restoration of a human life, the locals are overcome with fear and dread. Why? Because they're staring at their ruined local economy floating right there in the lake. Paralyzed by the massive financial loss and, frankly, terrified by the unpredictable power Jesus just displayed, they actually beg him to leave their region immediately.
Interestingly enough, the healed man has the exact opposite reaction. He desperately begs to leave with Jesus, wanting to follow the guy who just saved his life. But Jesus does something pretty unusual here. He tells the man, no, stay behind. He commissions him to go back to his own home and act as a living witness to his family and his community, to tell them about the great things God has done for him. So this guy essentially becomes the very first missionary to the pagan Decapolis region. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought, straight from our source material. The text masterfully backs us, the audience, into a corner. We're forced to contrast the astronomical economic value of 2,000 pigs against the priceless restoration of one single broken human being. Why did the locals prefer their property, their undisturbed status quo, over a miraculous healing? And when we look at our own world today, what does the story reveal about how we truly value a single human life, especially when it comes at a high economic cost? It's a fascinating question to chew on. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.